Okay. So hi everyone. This is a part of a series of videos that will be geared towards discussing improvements that the Syrian American and expatriate efforts, how they can be improved, and where we can locate our weaknesses and how we can discuss alternatives to making them stronger. The goal of these panels are to create a national dialogue, and so we have a few guests, and each panel will vary between each topic that we discuss. And so today's topic will be the overall gist of the difference between the aid efforts between Syrians and Syrian Americans and the outreach efforts of Syrians and Syrian Americans. So we have Shiam Galyoun, and so she'll introduce herself. And then I will introduce myself.
I think we lost Niwa.
We did lose Niwa.
She's a chef, but we're both frozen. She's on a train.
Yeah, but Ninwa's back.
She back? Oh, okay, yay, great.
Okay, so introduce yourself, Shiam.
Live.
Hi, Ninwa. We missed you.
Yeah, we're live, Ninwa.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Shiam Galyoun. I was born in Houston, Texas, and I went to school in Austin, and in a week I'm moving back to Houston. And I've worked with Syrian American Council, Haram Foundation, Watan Maram Foundation, so like political and humanitarian stuff. We have a humble student group at UT that put on a few Syria events this semester.
And Ninwa, introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Ninwa. I was born in Boston, Massachusetts. Both of my parents are from Syria. I graduated college last May and have been working for human rights on their Syria project since then. I've been traveling a lot, Turkey and Jordan and Lebanon, to work with Syrian refugees. And yeah, that's me.
Okay. And I'm Noor Shakfe. My family's from Hama, Syria. And I've worked with many Syrian American organizations and non-Syrian American organizations ranging from outreach to humanitarian aid. And so it is great to have you guys, and I'm really excited that we're going to do this. So a few questions were written about the overall the topics that are going to be discussed, and so one of the major questions that we have is the Syrian effort evolving more quickly, the Syrian effort meaning the effort inside of Syria by Syrians, and thus diverging from the Syrian American effort. So this is specifically in relation to aid efforts and outreach efforts. So there is, to give a slight overview, the aid efforts, Syrians inside of Syria have begun their own humanitarian aid efforts, where they actually do send out individuals who need healthcare, for example, to different countries to receive aid. And it doesn't seem that this particular program has become funded or has found funding from Syrian Americans yet. It's very new. So that could be the issue, but it seems that Syrians are taking on more of a role in rebuilding Syria and getting aid to the people inside of Syria who don't really get a lot of aid. So I was wondering, what do you guys think in terms of how they are diverging? I know that Syrians inside of Syria do apply for grants often. I do know that some Syrian American organizations apply for grants. I'm not sure how widespread that practice is, but I thought it was something interesting that Syrians do it and not Syrian Americans do it as often. And also that I don't know that Syrian Americans have actually started funding those programs where they fund Syrians to leave Syria for medical care and then interact with them over the period of their care. And try to help rebuild the person, which is a new program that's coming out from a lot of the local civilian councils in Syria. So I guess we'll start with Ninwa. Ninwa, what do you think based on your experience with Physicians for Human Rights and your overall experience with the Syrian American community?
So in regards to the grants, I know it's very, very hard for individuals to get a grant unless they're backed by a registered NGO. And I think, in my opinion, one of the biggest problems is that the Syrian American community isn't united. We have a lot of organizations that are working in very small numbers, and they're targeting Syrian Americans in also very small numbers. So I think for countries or, to give those grants to people, we need a solid base of a unified team, and we also need to work together. I think that's the biggest problem in our community. I also think that the Syrians inside of Syria are targeting, they're in a war zone right now. They need help in any way they can. And I think that the Syrian Americans are diverging more towards social media and outreach. And I think that another one of our biggest problems is instead of reaching out to, outsiders to spread awareness and get more people to donate, more people to get involved and care about Syria, we're targeting the same group over and over and over. And they're starting, people get tired, people have things going on in their life, so I think that we need to make our base larger and access more people. So that's, I think, our biggest problems.
Okay, thanks. Shiam?
I've seen exactly what Nina was talking about, especially I've heard so many people say over and over that one of the biggest problems that Syria has is the same people donating over and over, which is when we can dissect that and say, okay, it's on us to tap into new communities, but at the same time, there hasn't been like a national humanitarian aid for Syria in the way that there has been in Europe. Which I don't know how we can make that happen or what's going on there.
Are you talking about like those campaigns where they have those commercials?
Where it's like Save the Children or UNICEF or something, and they have a commercial raises awareness about Syria and fundraises money, and that has not happened in the United States. And I think that is I think that's kind of intentional to keep Syria off of people's minds. It's almost as if even the humanitarian aid organizations know that Americans don't want to think about Syria. And it contributes to the cheapening feeling that Syrian Americans have in America. We work so hard and we get overlooked and dismissed all the time. And I don't think we should stop for a second, but we have to acknowledge that these are things that we're dealing with, and that it's like just Syrian Americans talking about Syria. And that's, I think, that's cool. Sorry, what was your original question?
So I was really more focusing right now this portion of the conversation to just the humanitarian aid efforts. So like to go over to like give an overview of, I guess, the established humanitarian aid efforts. We do have multiple Syrian American humanitarian groups, all united under one umbrella called ARCS, which is the American Relief Coalition for Syria. So you do have like some humanitarian organizations like tag teaming with each other. So for example, like Maram and Karam, I think that they've ran campaigns together. I remember. But what I was
Karam has done the best job of like reaching out to new groups of people to get involved with Syria. And I think Walton is just getting started in America. So.
But I was wondering if there is a divergence between the way Syrian Americans are funding the humanitarian effort versus the way the Syrians are doing it. So what I mean is, typically, the way I understand it is Syrian Americans they'll fund camps. Like, I mean, the very important camps, like, for example, Camp Zaytuna is a very, very important camp. There's a lot of money that goes into the refugee camps in the surrounding areas, and unfortunately, it's just really dangerous right now to go and say, you know, here's a ton of food baskets, go inside, because, I mean, at any point, anyone can die. So the risk becomes higher and higher as we progress. But is there something that we can do, particularly to make sure that what Syrian Americans are doing is in line with what Syrians need from us? Because I think, like, I personally feel that there is a lot of foreign aid going into these refugee camps. And so I feel like our efforts should probably be more inside of Syria, where aid doesn't really get into because the international organizations are not willing to send their people in there. But I know when we were in Syria in March 2013, there was like Save the Children Foundation, and there were like Doctors Without Borders. And so there are these groups like going inside of the border areas, not anymore, unfortunately. But I think it's possible to apply for grants for such large camps on the borders because they're such well-documented camps. So, and I know that the U.S. government also works a lot with different humanitarian organizations to try to give more aid to those particular projects inside of Syria. I'm not sure how effective it has been, though, because I don't really monitor these projects on a daily basis. So just in terms of aid, I mean, have you, in your opinion, seen that there is something that Syrians are doing that we're not really doing, that we're not really helping with, that we probably should be focusing on as we progress in this time? Ninwa.
Okay, so
I would say that, well, there's two parts to this. The first part is that, as you said, you're right. A lot of organizations are not willing to go inside Syria, but I think the other part of it, and our biggest problem, is a lot of the funders are not willing to risk, to have a security risk for the people that are going to be distributing this aid. So that's a big problem that we face. I think also you're looking at organizations that, like you said, Camp Zaytuna, Utme, like there's a lot of camps that are getting great funding, but because the focus is on those camps, there's a lot of other areas that are lacking, like you said, inside Syria. I also think are being backed by big organizations, and that's certain groups can't get in. They'll find the means within themselves and within their neighboring communities, versus us, we just focus on the border areas. And I think that Syrian Americans need to take the approach of finding ways to get in, whether it's themselves or whether passing off at the border or finding other ways to get aid into the less known areas.
Okay. I do just want to make one point. So this is by no means, like, using examples such as Camp Zaytuna, like, no one is trying to say that that's not a really great program, because it is an excellent program. And I just don't want any viewers to think that this is us trying to be really mean or something. I love Camp Zaytuna.
Of course, no.
So just, you know, this is just, that's a disclaimer for everyone who watches this. Shiam?
Well, first of all, I think when I think of I think Syria needs everything. I don't know how to prioritize psychosocial therapy for kids, food, versus developing like a civilian infrastructure, like the civilian councils and the Free Syrian lawyers who they're working, and like their work is important. So who should we support? And so that's always been a challenge. And then there's the fact that we're across the Atlantic. So any advocacy efforts we do, I think the issue of practicality comes up. You know, like more people will want to donate clothes, but we live across the Atlantic. We really, I mean, it's like hard because so many people only donate clothes, but money is so much more useful because it's easier to transport over there, and it's better to buy the stuff from over there and give it to them. And I think that's been I mean, for me, when I think about humanitarian aid, those two things have been my biggest problems. Is it's hard to prioritize what people need, and so I just like do whatever comes my way. Sure, I'll support this project, and I'll support this one, and I'll support this one, because they're all really important. And I know a lot of people will might see, unfortunately, in war, like to put psychosocial therapy kind of on the back burner, because hierarchy of needs. You know, you need first. Um, but it is a big deal. I mean, I think, and we all remember that when Koch refugee camp was bombed last week, and the children just got their dead classmate and just wanted to get back to school and like didn't like. How do you process that?
Yeah, that is a huge issue. I mean, like if we have 4 million refugees inside of Syria, or 6 million, then I mean, there isn't enough money, and that's the problem. Like we just don't have that capital. One of the things that um, and I believe that psychosocial programs and programs that work to recreate normalcy inside of, like, for children and adults too, are crucial, because I think that one of the aspects of humanitarian aid that I think doesn't get a lot of attention is, like, you can give someone clothes and you can give them a tent or a shelter, but if you can't supply them with what they need to hope and to feel like people can hear them, people can see them, people care about them, they're not alone, then you're missing a huge aspect of humanitarian aid. And how do we do that from so far away? I was thinking, I know that the local council of Daraya, the local civilian council of Daraya, they started planting their own gardens for food. So I mean, do you think that Syrian Americans should start trying to plan, or trying to maybe not necessarily help plan, but just try to fund those projects that are sustainable, so that we can remove funding from not remove, but just decrease it from other areas by taking care of it. So for example, like spending less money on food, but because crops are growing and then they're feeding people. And then we could redirect it to psychosocial programs, for example, because we do have a limited amount of funding and it's hard.
Noor.
Yes.
Correct me, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, Nima, but I think you, Noor, talked to the local councils maybe more, so what do they want us to do?
See, that's the thing. So one of our guests is not here. So she was supposed to be very crucial to this part of the discussion. But I do know, like, for example, they have programs where they send out patients to, like, injured civilians to Lebanon and to Turkey, and they need people, they look for Syrian Americans to pay for their medical costs, but also to go visit these people and to create a relationship with these people, so that these people can feel like they have a family, or they feel like they can have, or that they have someone who is really supporting them and by their side. And someone, actually, I was talking to them, they said, we want to build people. We want to build them again. And so I think that that's something that maybe it's not, I mean, it's the world's worst humanitarian crisis, and there's not enough aid going inside of Syria. So there's a lot to juggle. But people in Syria are doing the best that they can, and I'm just wondering whether or not we are doing the best that we can to try to emphasize what those people are doing, and trying to also get enough backing from foreign groups to kind of take care of the outer portions of people, like, for example, in the Ultimate Camp, where, I mean, it's pretty stable there, whereas inside of, like, Homs, for example, or inside of Kafr Zeta, where they're bombing often, where the situation is much more volatile, if there's something that we should be doing for them, because at this point, they really need help in a lot of ways. People of Damascus need help in a lot of ways. And so, and it's really, I mean, we have to triage now. I think we just have to triage. And so, what do you think?
I think we lost Nima.
Yeah, we did.
Nima's back there.
Okay, but so what do you think? So, Ninwa, we were talking about triaging and how maybe it's a good time to start triaging the different portions of humanitarian aid, because the crisis is too big. There's not enough funds going inside of Syria.
I think,
yes.
There's something else going on here, because all these problems that you point out, I think people have tried to solve them. So Mahmoud Qudsi in California, I think, did the 5% website, where you can see what projects need to be funded in Syria, and you can donate your time, and, like, trying to organize the humanitarian relief effort. And it does, like, nothing ever really seems to take off.
Yeah.
And I think part of it has to be like when you look at the composition of our community, a lot of us are like college age or like trying to start college, like, or like a job, or yuppies, or like people who immigrated to America. And um, it it seems like I mean, we live in a society that hasn't seen a revolution yet, so we're living in a revolutionless society trying to support these projects, and we're like failing miserably at it.
Yeah. That is a very good point. I think part of the reason that it's harder for smaller projects, like the 5% movement is a very great, it's a really, really great project in my opinion. I think it's harder for it to take off because we have so many established larger humanitarian organizations that people will typically, like, I want to give money to something. Okay, let me just go look up ARCs and, you know, pick an organization and just donate to that. And so I think that we don't have a real even dispersion of funds between the different humanitarian organizations. And I think another problem is that each humanitarian organization typically focuses on one specific area or one specific region. And so because of that, there might be, I mean, it's possible for there to be disparities in the amount of aid and the types of aid that people are getting, you know, and how willing people are to go inside of Syria. So, for example, I know Walton has like the most expensive internal distribution pathways or whatever inside of Syria. Like if you want to get something, and you know, international organizations, you know, Walton works with the European Union, they work with Islamic Relief, they work with all of these organizations. These organizations give Walton stuff. Go and give this to this city, and then Walton goes and does it because Walton has such extensive distribution means. I don't really know what to call it, but so I mean, I think that we do have some of the movement inside of Syria that we need. I mean, there are obviously problems with that, but I think that it part like what Nin was saying, like our community, like we have established groups and then we have newer groups, and I don't know if we make room for the newer groups, and I'm not sure that, you know, we do work together comprehensively enough to make sure that what we're doing is at least evenly distributing what people, like, for the different cities. You know, like we can't, I don't know if it's okay to like, you know, let's say you have two cities that are equally destroyed, damaged, and in distress. Is it okay to give one more aid than the other? I don't know. Can we balance that out? I mean, does that make sense what I'm saying, or am I like very bad at talking?
No, what you're saying makes sense, and I think that's because sometimes, actually all the time, humanitarian aid organizations and people who focus on humanitarian aid have to like separate politics and humanitarianism. And but I think all of us know that the reason why there's a humanitarian crisis is because of politics, and that's part of it. Is that like, oh, we're split in all these directions. Who do we support? Everyone is in need. I think the key is to stop the violence first and foremost.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that is the major issue. I do know, though, like there was a humanitarian organization I know that had like promised dialysis machines to a doctor in a specific area, and when that humanitarian organization found out that that doctor was in this area and it was out of like the coverage zone of that humanitarian organization, they actually decided not to give the dialysis machines to that physician. So like I said, I think there's a lot of compartmentalization, and I don't know if there's enough cooperativity. And I mean, something that I would like to see if I were like an attorney, and I don't know, like, something that I would like to happen is that all of the local civilian councils of Syria can unite under one name umbrella, and they can have a representative from each local council, and then, you know, they can meet monthly or weekly or to every 2 months or something, and say this particular city is having issues with this, and then these are the projects that we want to do, and this is like the funding that we're going to need for it, and this is how many people it's going to help, and things like that. And then if the humanitarian, like ARCs, can sit and look at this and have an ARCs budget, which maybe already exists, and then they can start dividing in that way, and then also but save money for the other projects, like important projects like Camp Zaytuna and things like that, so that they can keep going. Because I think we're at a point where we have so many people who need help, and we have limited funds. We need to triage, but we also need to, I think, to just be more effective in how we decide to distribute the funds that we do have. I think that applying for grants is something that we should be doing on a much larger scale than that I know personally exists. I'm not sure if maybe there's more than I know exists, but if there isn't. But I don't see it in mass, and I think that having it in mass might be something. I think that since we do have presence on the Hill, it might be easier to talk to U.S. aid. It might be easier to talk to, international relief organizations that do this kind of stuff, because I know that they want to get in. I know that, Save the Children talks about Syria a lot. They have campaigns about Syria a lot. And so I think that it's a matter of talking to these organizations in a way that we can at least find some compromise. I know, though, on the other hand, that the United Nations, for example, does not give funds to an organization that the Assad regime has not approved. So that means that all of ARCs probably doesn't get any money from the United Nations for that reason. And so that it's another challenge. And so, what is the level of extensive responsibility of humanitarian organizations? And are they reaching out to the United Nations? Are they trying to get around that international law or whatever it is that causes that issue? And where is the fine line? But how effective are we being? And I think that's like the overall question here, because I feel like when the people of the local civilian councils are calling me and they're like, we need to do this project. We have this person. Like, this person is out of money. They're in Turkey. They're alone. They need help. And I don't know what to do, because I don't run a humanitarian organization. And I don't have, and it's hard. It's really hard to get everyone just to even talk to each other sometimes, because everyone's so far apart, everyone's so busy. And so, I think we have to wrap up this particular discussion and move on to the next part. Just in a few words, what is the gist of your overall thinking for this particular issue? Let me just start with Ninwa.
The issue of humanitarian aid, in general humanitarian aid?
Yeah, just everything that we've discussed so far. What are your conclusions? Do you have any proposals? What are the options that you think, based on your experiences, what would you like to see, for example? Let's just get the dialogue talking. I mean, this isn't to criticize any humanitarian organization, because they are going above and beyond. And we all acknowledge that, and we all recognize that. But how can we improve? Because we need to improve. Every day we have to improve. So what do you think we can do?
I think that the biggest thing is we need to put things into perspective for people. I think Sham brought up a great point, for example, about the clothes. A lot of people will send clothes from here, but it's a lot more efficient if we just buy it there and distribute it. I think we need to tap into ways to save money so that we can give it to the Syrians, or save money in certain ways so that we can put it into a more effective use. I think that we also need to definitely, this is the theme throughout all of my criticism of the revolution, I think that we need to tap into non-Syrians for this humanitarian aid. I think we can do it to a certain extent, and then I think we need to tap into, people who are interested in human rights, and we need to put things into different perspectives for them to bring on a unique approach. This is 3 years into the conflict. A lot of people have donated food, clothes, money already, but we need to keep people engaged, and as long as we find unique ways to keep them engaged, they'll be willing to help out.
Okay, and Sham?
I agree 100% with Minwa. It's on my personal to-do list. I'm going to be done with school in a few days, and I'll be going back to Houston. And I feel like I can only speak to other Syrian Americans who are like me, who aren't in charge of a big organization, who, are maybe trying to like I'm trying to go to med school, so maybe other people who are trying to figure out how to fit Syria into their lives. I want to reach out to public spaces in Houston, like public libraries and churches and synagogues. And I think all the mosques have talked about Syria, though. And just have film screenings and talk about Syria, and then ask them, we need your help. Can we hold a fundraiser with your community?
Okay.
And then just go from person to person. And then also say, oh, hey, can you sign this petition in support of us because we're going to go to our local representatives. And it's gonna be slow and steady work, but I'm doing hopefully, and I think that for Syrian American can do that too.
Okay. Thanks, Sam. And then just another disclaimer, like none of us run humanitarian organizations, so these are just our perceptions and our thoughts, so we're not trying to criticize any organization. But moving on to outreach efforts, to go over the bullets that are here on the, we have a small analysis, like compare and contrast of Syrian Americans versus Syrians in terms of their actions. So Syrian Americans typically focus on social media campaigns, which include Facebook statuses, tweets, like campaigns, videos, and changing their profile pictures. They use graphic images and statistics. So, for example, like 100,000 dead, and then they publish images of like a starving child. They do have panels. However, limited marketing has resulted in predominantly concerned Syrian expatriate audiences, and not really, broader American audiences. And they're reaching out to news outlets. Syrians, on the other hand, seem to emphasize similarities between Syrians and Americans. For example, like the Kefrembel posters that typically show, reach out to Americans and try to relate to them. Like, for example, when they did the Boston bombing poster and had it shown to Boston, and then documenting the changes that are happening in Syria on a daily basis. And then the local civilian councils speak with concerned individuals from all over the world and work with international governments, and Syrians come here, which is an effort of Syrian American or Syrian expatriates and Syrians to go on tours in the United States to speak. The overall contrast, it seems, is that ultimately the Syrian American effort focuses on sympathy, and there isn't much information about how people who don't know much about the crisis can take action. Whereas the Syrians, are geared towards bridging communication gaps and creating human concern between individuals across cultures and oceans. And the effort is to gain empathy and possibly inspire action. So, what is your thoughts on that, Minwa?
Did you say? Sorry, I couldn't hear you. It cut. Did you say me or?
Minwa, yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to outreach, like I said, I think that we just need to engage other, this is my message the whole way through. We need to tap into other networks. I know for us, so there's different types of outreach, right? There's awareness, and then there's advocacy for, political agendas, and then there's policy, and then there's documentation. I know from my experience, we do forensic medical documentation for victims of torture and sexual violence. So we do outreach on that. I think that there's a lot of different things going on under the umbrella of the revolution. I think there's starvation, there's rape, there's torture, there's a lot of different big-time issues. I think that the biggest problem is that we try to do outreach on everything, and I think that we just need to unite as an effort, but then properly distribute all the different things, including one of the biggest ones that is a little taboo in our culture is the psychological impacts that this is having on people. And I think that we tend to focus so much on how many people are starving or how many people are being affected physically, and that's a big issue. But I think that the psychological part is something that's going to last a long time after all of those visible effects are gone. So I think we need to really focus on outreach on very specific issues, but properly delegate them to different groups of people, whether it be youth or organizations.
Okay. And Shyam, what are your...
Um, so has its place, and I think especially in this day and age, you can't not to do social media. Um, I don't know. It's such a big topic that I'm still developing my ideas on. Nor, what do you think?
Um, I think, I mean, I agree with using social media. I think it's really important. I think that the things that we emphasize though are things that would typically like seem to be turning people away from listening to what we have to say rather than inspiring people to listen to what we want to say. And like we also have to like keep in mind that we have like media outlets that give varying information um, and not in a positive way. And I think that one of the major issues that we have to overcome that I think that we haven't really tried as a group, you know, in a huge effort is to really emphasize the point that these are civilians, that Syrians are moderate people. They're not like religious extremists. The whole country isn't, you know, a group of Al Qaeda members and like you know, people are like, this is the Middle East, this is what happens, this is just what it looks like, and so, you know, why should I care? I'm going to invest in malaria malaria nets. But at the same time, I mean, this is the world's worst humanitarian crisis. It does deserve attention. But how should we? And I know that there have been a lot of efforts to bridge that gap between East and West. But how can we make it more effective? How can we say to the people of America and of the West, like, this is not a bunch of Sunnis trying to kill other Sunnis. This is not a bunch of Sunnis trying to kill a bunch of Christians. This is not a bunch of Sunnis trying to kill a bunch of Alawites. You know, like where do we find that line where we show people like this is humans, these are humans, this is a government that's oppressing these humans, this is what we want, these are our goals. You know, please like pay attention to what's happening. This is why it's important. You know, this is how it affects you personally, and this is what you can do to help. You can do this X, Y, Z, A, B, C. You know, where we take back the narrative and we also give people maybe like some action items that they can take. You know, and whether or not that means we have to go door to door in our neighborhoods and talk to people, I don't know. But I know that it's a major issue that people think we're a bunch of terrorists. So, like, we have to really bridge that gap.
I just want to add a point to that too. I think that, as you said, you were right on, that the media definitely manipulates the fact that they look at it in a very narrow perspective. I think that people tend to look at it as, you know, this is the majority versus the minority. I come from a Christian household. We've been with the opposition since the beginning, at least my family, and so I think that we need to take away this sectarian focus of the media and bring it back to the humanitarian, the humanity of it. This isn't, like you said, this isn't a government that's oppressing people and then, you know, Sunnis want to fight back and kill off all the minorities. This is people who are being oppressed, who their human rights are being taken away, and we as an opposition want equality and justice for all Syrians. We're not fighting for the rights of one group, and I think that we as an opposition need to find unique ways to highlight that.
Okay. And Shyam, your final thoughts?
Well, the thing is, like, our revolution is real. This genocide is real. These massacres are real. And I think that's one indication of how real our revolution is that while it is branded to a certain degree, we don't have a huge PR effort on our end because it's a real atrocity. For the most part, it's not constructed. But obviously we know, like, there have been some small cases where like some of the facts aren't 100% straight. And when it comes to like how do we bridge that gap, I think there are some really horrible psychological truths we have to face about what it means to live in a world with borders and what it means to be moving from ethnically based countries to nation states. And so if you notice, the most successful humanitarian aid campaigns that raised awareness about Syria involved white people like reenacting some sort of Syrian suffering. And those went viral, and I think we have to acknowledge that that's what works.
Okay. Yeah, that is a good point too. I think that this is a very large topic that I don't think we're out of time, so we can't continue to discuss it. But to the audience, to our audience, thank you for listening and watching. It would be really great to get your questions and your feedback on this discussion so that we can continue the dialogue and hopefully expand the dialogue so that we can better help the people inside of Syria because they need it more than we can describe. Thank you all thank you for participating in One and Sham. And thank you to all those who watch. And please remember to send your questions and your comments, and they will be addressed in the next session. Is there anything you guys want to say before we go, Minwa or Sham?
No, thanks, Nora. Free for
Okay. Minwa, you want to say anything?
Thanks, Nora, for organizing this, and thanks for people watching.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys, and thanks, Sham, for broadcasting this. And thank you guys for attending. So I'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.